Today I want to show you how to transfer disk images from your Mac or PC onto 5¼ inch floppy disks. And since it first came out in December, there were a couple updates to the game, and people who had purchased the game received disk images with these updates. There haven't been a lot of changes to the game, mostly very minor cosmetic things or small bug fixes. But if you want to make sure that you're playing with the latest version, you can go ahead and create new floppies using this technique. This is also useful if you bought the game without floppy disks, but you want to go ahead and try it just for nostalgia's sake. As long as you have 4 double-sided, double-density floppy disks, you should be good to go. One thing to note, the disk drive that we used when creating these floppies was able to write on write-protected disks. So you'll notice that there's actually no notch here on the back side of the disk. If you're going to be doing this at home, you'll either have to disable the write protect switch within your disk drive, or just go ahead and notch these disks using either a hole punch or a disk notcher. I have another video which shows how to disable the write protect switch in your disk drive, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes. To do the disk transfer, we're going to be using a program called ADT Pro, written by David Schmidt, and we'll need several different pieces of hardware. First, we'll need an Apple II Plus or IIe computer with a 5¼ inch floppy drive. We will need a Super Serial card, and then we'll also need an RS-232 to USB adapter cable. We'll need a Mac or Windows PC. And then finally, we'll need a copy of the ADT Pro disk. I'm using version 2.1.0 of the software. ADT Pro also works with the Ethernet card if you have one of those. And you can even use it with a standard audio cable that plugs into the 3.5mm jack on the back of the Apple IIe. Let's go ahead and get started. You can see I've got the floppy drive plugged into slot 6 on the Apple IIe. I'm going to plug my Super Serial card into slot 2, and then I'll plug my RS-232 to USB adapter into the back of the card, and then I'll plug this into my Mac or Windows PC. Now that we've got everything plugged into the Apple, I can go ahead and put my ADT Pro disk into the floppy drive and start up the computer. Here you can see the different options for ADT Pro. We're going to be using the serial connection, so we can just hit S there. Once that starts up, we want to make sure to hit the config or G and make sure that it's set for the Super Serial card slot 2, and we can just leave the baud rate and everything else at its defaults. Now let's go ahead and get things set up on the PC. The ADT Pro site is where you want to go to make sure that your connections are all correct. And specifically for your Super Serial card, this will show you how to set the dip switches on the card. You can also order cables here in case you need them. Once you've got all of the hardware set up, you can just hit the download button, and this will take you to the GitHub for David Schmidt's ADT Pro code. Once you're there, you can download the appropriate file for your platform, either the DMG for Mac, the tar.gz for Linux, or the zip file for Windows. We've already gone ahead and done that and installed it into our application directory. So we can just go over to ADT Pro now and start it up. Once ADT Pro has started up, you want to hit the serial button, and it should say connected if everything's working properly. To verify that everything's working, over on your Apple, you can hit the D key to get the directory. And this should give you a directory of disks that are available inside of this disks folder on your Mac or Windows laptop. So if we hit D, and then when asked for the file name, just hit return. And as you can see here, these are the files that are actually within the disks directory over here on the Mac. The easiest way to transfer the disk images is just to copy them into this disks folder over in ADT Pro rather than trying to change the default working directory. So for example, here I want to copy the new version of Nox Archaist. I'll go into the release directory, I'll go into the floppy build directory, And then I'll just select all of the disk images, and there should be 8 of them. And I'll copy those, and then I'll just paste them over here into my ADT Pro Disks directory. And now on the Apple, if we hit D for dir again, we should now see all of the Noxar Kayest disk images. So to do the disk transfer, I'm just going to remove the ADT Pro floppy from the drive, and I'll put in my first disk. So here, this is side 1, disk 1. We'll put that in. And then what I want to do is on the Apple, I'm going to hit R for receive. Okay, again, I'll hit return. And then I'll just scroll down, and what I want to do is I want to pick the main disk. So this is D1S1, and you can see they're all labeled with disk 1, side 1, disk 1, side 2, etc. So I'll just use the arrow keys to go down to that. Hit enter. And it asks me, okay, where do you want to write that disk? And so I want to pick slot 6, disk 1. And now it's starting to receive the data and write it. And you can see over here on the Mac, it's actually showing the progress, transferring the image from the Mac over to the Apple. Okay, and you can see it says complete. There were no errors, and we're done. We just need to repeat that receive step for the remaining disk images, and once we're done with all 8, then we should have a brand new working copy of Noxar Kayest with the updated version. Okay, I'm done transferring all 8 disk images. Let's go ahead and give it a try. I'll put in the back of the floppy since that's the boot. All right, everything seems to be working great, and I now have a copy of Noxar Kayest on 5 1/4 inch floppies.